Welcome to the Real Estate Pro Radio Show. I'm your host, Amber Arms, and we have with us today Vanessa Power from Doylestown, Pennsylvania. All right, welcome to the show, Vanessa. Thank you so much for coming on today. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And, I'm really fascinated to hear a little bit more about you and, what you do. I know that you're a real estate agent in the area, but, what do you do when you have free time? I feel like we're going into the fall season here, so there's so many things people can do now.
Yeah, so I am a real estate agent, but that is only one of my careers. I am also a high school economics and government teacher at a local public high school in Bucks County. I've been doing that for 25 years, and I picked up real estate a couple of years ago to kind of transition as I start looking towards the end of my teaching career, and I have a lot of years left in me. So that takes up a lot of my time is teaching. I love it. In fact, I'll come back to that probably a little bit later in the conversation.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
It's a big part of who I am. It's a big part of how I do things, and it's one of those things that it's a very rewarding job, and it's really been a roller coaster ride, but I have learned so much from it, and I thoroughly enjoy my students and just really love teaching. So that's a big part of who I am. I'm also a mother of 2 college-age daughters, so I'm kind of an empty nester at this point, so that kind of allows me to start exploring a lot of things that I didn't have the chance to do while I was raising kids and teaching full-time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I'm sure you were super busy. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I'm a former high school principal, so I did that for a little while, and then went back to the classroom. So I've juggled. I've worn a lot of hats. I'm a divorced single mom, so most of my kids' life I've been raising them. Their father was present, but they pretty much lived with me. So, that was a big juggle, but I'm super proud of them. They're both doing really, really well where they are, and they're still a huge part of my focus, even though they're both out of state. And, I like to read a lot. I run. I'm a very pretty big, people would say I'm maybe a little OCD about my exercise, and but that's my de-stressor. That's how I relieve my stress. And so it's a really, really important part of who I am as well.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I feel like you got so many different things going on. That's absolutely fascinating. Just being able to balance the real estate and the teaching on its own is huge. And then having 2 kids on top of that, congratulations on getting them, through childhood into adulthood. Sounds like you've done a wonderful job there. It's always wonderful getting to see all of the hard work pay off and see them really grow into their own people, and kind of explore and figure out who they are, right? And it's always such a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah. Couldn't have said that any better.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to get into real estate? Is that something that's a little bit more recent, or how long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so it is a bit more recent. Actually, I really started getting into it right before March of 2020, so right as COVID hit. And I had been approached about doing it many times from different people that I've known over the years. There's this idea out there that teachers make excellent real estate agents. I can see that. I feel like there is a natural fit there. So I've had people approach that. But with my kids and my other career stuff going on, it was hard to balance it until my kids got a little older. So I've been in it strong for about 2.5 years. It's, I have to kind of call myself a part-time agent because I have another full-time job, but anybody in real estate knows it's never really part-time.
Oh, no, definitely not.
So I do my teaching job, and that is first and foremost from 7:25 until 2:50 every day. But in between, I'm doing emails, and at night I'm doing calls and writing contracts and showing homes and, doing all of that. So it's been a juggle, but it's been 2.5 years of really exploring a whole nother career that has really been a wonderful learning experience. It's an ongoing learning experience, but it also has really allowed me to take my skill set from teaching and being a high school administrator and really learning how to use those skills and help people in a different way. And it's really a transition into a new career for me full time in the next few years. And I can't wait for me to have the time to do that.
Oh, yes. And I can definitely see how, at first people may not see a lot of the similarities between those two careers. But if you actually think about it, there is a lot of skills that you transfer. I mean, obviously you have to have really good people skills and a really good, working with different personalities. But I think there's also just a good dedication aspect to it as well. I feel like a lot of people kind of underestimate just how much hard work and time can go into just teaching on an everyday basis, much less long term. And real estate's a lot the same way. People, when they get to the, final end of the line and they've, bought their house, they see the big number on the check and they say, oh, wow, you made so much money off of this. But there's so much work that goes into it beyond the scenes, working with, the seller's agent, working with the sellers, negotiating that whole process. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you that the market over the past couple of years was interesting to traverse, if nothing else. I'd say that's probably the word I would use. Yes.
Yeah. And it is a lot of work. It's a lot of time. There is a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on, and there's really no clock on that. And that's what I think sometimes people don't understand. There are times we're doing emails at 9, 10 o'clock at night because there's a deadline.
They need to get done by a certain time. Whenever that needs to happen, it needs to get done by that time.
Yeah, and your clients are your responsibility, and you're accountable to them, and they're looking to you to make sure it happens. So, there is a pressure to it, but it's also very, very rewarding, because when you are able to tell them the good news, it's like nothing feels better than that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I work in insurance, so not quite as hard as the real estate market, essentially surf and turf, but it's a lot of the same thing, right? You have to be a mentor almost for people too, because when people are coming into, especially a real estate market like the one we just are transitioning out of, hopefully, it's a lot to really take in and understand and process and deal with on its own, much less when you're trying to buy a house and have 4 kids and a job to juggle. So it's definitely a calling, I would think, because you do have to do good by your clients. I mean, they're buying one of the biggest investments most people are going to make throughout their lifetime.
Absolutely.
And, being able to trust your agent is very important too.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something I work very hard. That's paramount to me. And I work very hard to get to know my clients, to share a lot about me with them so that they know who I am, because I think the more you really build that relationship, the trust comes with that. And that's a huge part of who I am as a teacher as well. I mean, I work really hard to build relationships with my students, and I make myself very human to them. And I do the same thing with my clients, because we all have ups and downs, and we all have stressful moments, and we all have a lot of things on our plate. And while I'm very professional, I want them to understand, like, I'm here for you and I get it. And I want you to know that I've been there, I've done it. So, I'm here to help reduce the struggles that maybe I've experienced on my own. So I really believe very firmly in building that trust through really sharing a lot of who I am.
100%. And, coming into the market at the time you did, I feel like that there's so many extra complications to just the things that you had to traverse. What would you say is the most difficult thing that you found getting into the market when you did?
Wow. I think the most difficult thing, and I think pretty much any agent will tell you this, whether they've done it for 30 years or 1 year, I think that time, the spring, really the summer of 2020 through the winter of 21, is everything was off the table. Anything you could have predicted was out the window. So anything was fair game. And all the rules got flipped. So people weren't getting home inspections. People were putting down crazy amounts of cash or paying all cash. People were covering any appraisal gaps that didn't matter what. So you couldn't predict what was going to come in. You didn't really even know where you fell in the competition. You just had to go in and just do the best that you could. and keep your fingers crossed. And I learned real quick, I'm a very competitive person, and I can be very aggressive when I need to. And I learned real quick that, you know, you can't be passive, you can't be meek, and you can't be quiet on the sidelines. Like, you have to make your presence known. You have to make your clients known. You have to make sure your clients know this is what it's going to take, and walk them through that, and certainly help them understand the risks in some of those things, and back off when they tell you, I hear you, but I'm not willing to do that. But you really had to just be clear, direct, prompt, and aggressive. And if you didn't have that kind of personality, you were going to really have a hard time as an agent. And I think the agents that were really able to get deals for their clients were the ones that did well. And I was fortunate to do as well as I did, especially as early on as I did, because you had to tap into that human side of things. And it wasn't really the predictable business model that people know, and you had to be willing to adjust. That was it. You had to be willing to adjust.
Yeah, that is interesting. I've heard from a lot of people that have been in the industry for, 30, 40 years that the real estate industry is very cyclical, right? You go in these cycles where it's, it's a seller's market for a bit, and then it's a buyer's market for a little bit, and then it just kind of shifts back and forth, and you have these dips like the '08 crash, and then I believe there was one back in the 90s or 80s as well. And just periodically, it just, these things tend to happen over time. But I don't think anybody could have predicted what happened in 2020 or 2021 when it did. And I feel like it kind of threw a lot of people for a loop that have had this industry, what it felt like a solved science. If there's anything that's going to prove that no day is the same, no day are you learning nothing, you're always learning something new in this business, I think it was 2020 and 2021, because some of the people that have been in here for so long, it felt kind of solved for them. And now it's like, oh, wow, we have this whole other, situation that came out of nowhere that nobody could have predicted.
Exactly. And it was, we've even just continued to see the economists struggle with this, because it's not a market that's really ever happened. We're not used to seeing such high inflation, but also such a high job market. We're not used to the shortages of products that we've had, but yet people are spending tons of money on other things. There's just really some anomalies, and the housing market became one of them. When those interest rates dropped as they did, nobody was prepared for what that market exploded with. And it really has been a very fascinating thing. I actually find it really fortunate for me that that's kind of where I kind of, learned to swim. I kind of got thrown in with the sharks, and it's like, dude, sink or swim or get away and figure it out.
Yeah,
and
100%.
I tend to do well in that kind of environment, and I think that really helped me dig my teeth in and really learn things very quickly. And I'm actually kind of grateful for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said that, people who learned through this environment, you guys are kind of forged in fire at this point. You guys have gone through one of the hardest markets you probably are going to see for the next 30, 40 years. So, it's only uphill from here, right?
Yeah.
That's what we hope anyway.
Yes.
This episode is brought to you by We Insure Center of Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. With access to over 200 carriers, We Insure is ready to service all of your insurance needs for home, auto, business, life, and more. Simply call 484-207-6640. Again, that's 484-207-6640, or visit WeInsureCenter.com. Get your free quote today. Yeah, and, I also keep an eye on things as things progress. And, over the summer in particular, we've seen that the interest rates have started raising a bit. And how do you think that's going to change the market going forward? I know that we've seen a little bit of a decrease in the number of people that are buying, but are we really going to be able to recover from this anytime soon, do you think, or is it going to take a while?
So I think it's really become apparent in the past month how the shift has already started to happen more progressively than I think was expected. I literally got off the phone with a good friend of mine who's been doing this for a while, and he's got 5 listings right now, all really good properties. He can't sell them. He's not getting offers, and he's dropping prices. You know, I just saw a statistic for in my area in Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia suburban area, we're now seeing that 50% of the homes that were listed as of September 1st have dropped their price at least once.
Wow.
So we're starting to see it's much slower. I've had some buyers that were pretty aggressive and now have slowed down a little bit, and some of it was the fear of the Fed raising rates again, and they just are kind of getting a little bit more cold feet. We're seeing sellers that are starting to realize they missed the boat. You know, it's not the strong sellers market that it was. There are great houses on the market right now, and they are not moving nearly as quickly as they would have 2 months ago. Some of it's the time of year. I mean, this is also a time of year where the market slows down a little bit. Kids are back in school. Everyone's getting readjusted to a schedule. The summer's over. But sometimes October you can see a little peak. And, you know, some of us are starting to think maybe we're not going to see that. So it is starting to change. I've been saying to some of my buyer clients that are kind of, you know, hesitant. I said, now is really your time. It really, really is, because there still is good inventory. The competition has really slowed down. And sellers are really finding that they're not going to get the top dollar they thought they were going to get. So there's a little room for negotiation. So it really, if you are a buyer that's been waiting, now is a really good time to explore it. Don't be too scared about interest rates, because relatively, you know, if you're connecting them historically to interest rates, we're not looking at super high interest rates. We're looking at interest rates that's higher, but historically they're not astronomical.
That's the other thing I find interesting, that people are drawing back so far on this, because like you said, it has been a lot higher. I believe back in like the 80s or 90s, we had double digit interest rates of like 18, 19%.
Yeah.
So, you know, looking at a 6 or 7%, you're like, I mean, it's not that bad. It could be a lot worse than that.
Yeah,
I think it's just the inflation that's getting people nervous, I think.
Definitely. I think it's a compounding factor of several different things we're seeing in the economy. And I also think that buyers are now becoming a little more particular because they can. And so that's also slowing some things down. The buyers are there. The demand is there, but the demand is not feeling as pressured. So I think that's another reason why we're seeing houses not sell. Not so much that buyers are scared as much as they've realized they don't have to do it so quickly. And I think that's been a big change. I know I've been seeing that. I just got off the phone with a client a little while ago who said, I'm not in a rush. I know I can wait now. I know I can play the market a little differently. I'm not in a rush.
Well, that's good. I think that's healthier too. You know, people, like you said, some people were tossing out inspections in order to make their offers more essentially desirable, to try and increase the chances of their bid getting picked. And I mean, this is a really big investment. If you accidentally buy a house that has $80,000 worth of mold damage in the basement, you bought a house with $80,000 of mold damage in the basement, and you're going to have to live with that. I mean, if you waive the inspection, you're essentially waiving any rights to say, oh, I should have known about this, or, you know, made a smarter decision with it. You can't always see damage like that. No. And I mean, I had a client in June who called me from Florida. They wanted to see a house. They literally toured the house, FaceTime on my phone. They trusted me to give them all the details that I could give them, and they bought that house with cash, sight unseen. Wow. And that's because they knew that it fit the needs. They were willing to take a few risks on some things, and they needed to get it bought as soon as possible. So, I mean, we were seeing some unbelievable things that people were willing to do with
several $100,000. It's amazing.
Oh, 100%. It truly was fascinating looking back at it, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of like you in that aspect. I also considered going for teaching. Actually, it was one of the major career decisions that I had decided to potentially pursue. But ultimately, I think it was the pay that really kind of crushed the dreams for me. I think, but it is always fascinating. Yeah, you see, there you go. You just got to do it hybrid, right? You do a little bit of teaching here, you do a little bit of real estate there, and then you can get the best of both worlds.
Yep.
But yeah, it is really fascinating looking back on it. I just know that there's going to be all these documentaries that come out about it with analysts looking at it in retrospect and, basically breaking down the whole pandemic and how it influenced different industries and the economy in different countries. And I think it's going to be so fascinating looking at it in retrospect, honestly. But even just from a real estate standpoint, it just completely turned everything on end.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And I know there's so many good features and traits that you can find in a good real estate agent. But if you had to pick one for a person to prioritize, what would you pick? Out of curiosity?
I really think their communication skills, I think, is really, really essential. And I think you can learn that just in your first encounter with an agent, whether it be via email, text message, Instagram. I mean, there's so many millions of ways people initially connect with a real estate agent. But their communication skills, in the sense, how quickly are they responding? Are they really responding to what you've asked, or are they telling you what they want you to hear? I think it's really important to make sure that a good real estate agent really gets to know you and wants to talk to you about you. And all of it really comes down to being a people person, but a good listener, and really being open to understanding that this is a job that can be at times 24 hours a day. And if a client has a question, you want to do the best you can to be responsive to that question in a reasonable amount of time. And clients need to understand that real estate agents are humans and they have families and they have lives. But I think through just real good, clear communication right out of the gate, you can really determine what your relationship is going to be with that agent and if it's going to be the right fit.
Oh, 100%. And I like how you touched on not just the speed at which people reply, but also that the quality of the response is there.
Yeah.
Because if you're just saying a yes or no answer right away, I mean, that probably answers most questions, but it might also not be sufficient. Maybe there needs to be more information supplied. Maybe it needs to elaborate on it. I feel like you really touched on a good point there with the quality of the response. If you're talking to a client and, you realize that they have this very specific need that came about in regular conversation, maybe they didn't think to mention that they need to have an office or a dedicated office. Maybe they didn't consider that it's something that would be good for them, but they have 4 kids, right? So having dedicated office space might be really beneficial for them. Just stuff like that you can pick up in general conversation that, maybe it's not listed on a spreadsheet or on their, wish list, but being able to actively listen and pick up on those things and apply them really matters, I think, when you're having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, and I think that's a skill I do well, and I think that's where you can make my connection to being a classroom teacher. I can't do my job well if I can't communicate well, and really to be a good teacher means that you are really listening to what your students are saying and, really being able to pull out what is accurate, what needs to be improved upon, how can you restructure their way of thinking so that they're hitting the right mark. And so really communication is such a strong asset for a good educator that I feel like in the job of real estate, you're doing that in just a different capacity. So the communication piece is essential.
100%. And also the fact that not everybody's the same, right? Just like how every child's education isn't the same, everybody's home life and situation with the house that they need to live in isn't going to be the same either. So being able to essentially customize it to whatever that person needs, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, agreed.
100%, 100%. And, you know, what would you say is your favorite thing that has come about with doing the real estate thing? You said that it's very rewarding for you. What would you say if you had to pick one good memory, like one good experience that like defines what you enjoy about real estate?
So there have been so many good memories. I might have to give you two.
Okay, all right. Hey, we get double. I mean, that's bonus right there.
They're slightly different, but they have such meaning to me. First of all, I absolutely love working with first-time home buyers. I really love the education process of it, but I really love the excitement of seeing them really get the ability to make this first step. And for some couples, it has been something that they've worked on for a few years and put their money away. For others, it is they have been married for 20 years and finally can afford to own their own house. You know, there's so many different ways you can frame a first-time home buyer. But one of my absolute favorite experiences is an older client of mine. She's in her 50s and she's never owned her own home. She's never had children, but she had bounced around in some relationships, et cetera, that have always just kind of prevented her from really living her own life. And she's a hardworking woman that's owned her own business, self-employed, and she just finally had enough and got out of a relationship and made the decision that it's time for her. And she just actually texted me last night. We closed on her house about a month ago, and she texted me last night and just said, you know what, I just really feel like I need to thank you again because you kind of helped me understand that some of the decisions I was hesitant to make I was really in the right place at the right time to make them. And you helped me pull that trigger to do it. And I can't believe how happy I am. And I really have so much to thank of the conversations. And, you know, again, it goes back to the relationship piece, but that's just that one is just such a sweet thing for me because, you know, this woman in her 50s is now really finally getting to experience something that she's worked so hard for. And I'm just so happy for her. The other piece of it too is I actually also work closely in the divorce real estate space. And some of that is from my own experiences of really going through a pretty tough divorce in the sense that selling the home and the home being the primary asset and there being some secrets that were held in the midst and that came out during the selling of the home. And it kind of put me on a path to get my specialization in divorce real estate. So I have what's called an RCSD, which is a real estate collaboration specialist in the divorce niche. And I've worked with a couple of people that have had to sell their homes as a result of the divorce. But some of what's been so rewarding is having some of the spouses that were not the breadwinner and never thought that they'd be able to buy a home after they had to sell their family home, but have work with them and find a way for them to restructure, work with some other professionals to help them restructure their assets, restructure their income so they can buy something and they can have their own space and they can start over. And it's such a rewarding thing from me personally doing that myself. And it was a long road for me to be able to buy my own house again. But that's a very, very personal thing for me. And that's an area in real estate that I'm really looking to grow and to build. But those clients are some of my most favorites as well, because that's a very different emotional process. And it's just so gratifying when you see them feel like they can begin a new life. It's really, really important.
That's such a beautiful thing because you feel like you're actually making an impact on people's lives. Like you're literally changing the course of their future and what their possibilities are. You know, it's not just helping them buy a house. You're helping them set up their future and helping them realize that they actually have one. You know, when you're going through a situation like that where you're getting out of, you know, a relationship, it can be hard for people to see the future, right? Their emotions can cloud their sight and what the possibilities are, and having somebody that not only understands it, but has also been through it as well, I think is really beneficial for those people to know that they're not alone and that they have a future ahead of them.
Yes. It's a very personal thing for me.
That's beautiful. And listen, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to, either buy a house or sell a house in this market, what's the best way for them to do so?
Probably because I can't always answer the phone during the school day.
Oh, absolutely.
Usually, I often tell people if they need to get a hold of me, the best way to first connect with me is via email. And that would just be at vanessapower@kw.com. I work with Keller Williams in Doylestown. That way I know, I can get a clear piece of communication from them and a way to respond to them promptly to set up a time to talk. That's generally the quickest, best way. Or you could always text me, and leave me some information, and I can certainly give you a call as soon as I'm available. And that's at 267-221-9405 is my direct line, which will go to my cell phone, so texting or leaving a voicemail. But those are the two best ways. I am on social media. If you just kind of plug in my name, Vanessa Power, you'll see I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, as well as on Facebook.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on to the show today. It was a pleasure. And, meeting another person that's just as crazy about learning things is always so fun. So it's absolutely wonderful having you on the show today. And, really happy to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I don't know what else to say, but I've enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.